All right, so this problem right here wants us to solve the quadratic equation using the what? Yeah, so the first step in using the quadratic formula is to go ahead and write it, okay? So I always write x equals negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a, not just the radical over 2a, the whole thing over 2a. Now I need to get everything in this problem on the same side of the equal sign. So I'm going to subtract 2x from both sides, there and there, to get that 2x to move to the left side. So when I do that, I have 3x squared minus 9x plus 6, and then there's nothing on the right, so we say equals 0. Okay? And next, I like to identify what a, b, and c are. A is the number next to x squared, so it's 3. B is the number next to x, so it's negative 9. And c is the number here by itself, so it's 6. So now we're going to plug those values into our quadratic formula. So x equals negative, and b is negative 9, plus or minus the square root of b squared, so negative 9 squared is 81, minus 4 times a times c, all over 2 times a. Notice that I put it all over. I didn't start my division sign here and just put the radical over. Notice I extended it all the way. And so I've got x equals 9 plus or minus the square root of 81. And then here I have negative 4 times 3, which is negative 12. And negative 12 times 6 is what? Negative 72. All over 6. Okay, so then I have x equals 9 plus or minus the square root of 9 all over 6. And so then that's x equals 9 plus 3 over 6, and x equals 9 minus 3 over 6. So that's 12 over 6, which is 2. And this is 6 over 6, which is 1. So my answers are x equals 2 and x equals 1, which is A. Okay, now let's say you had gotten a decimal. How would you evaluate this right here to see if it's the answer you got? Yeah, you could just type in the calculator negative 1 plus the square root of 73 and press enter, and then divide by negative 18, right? And then see if that decimal matches the decimal you got. Does that make sense? And if it does, then you do negative 1 minus the square root of 73, and you press enter, and you divide by negative 18, don't you? And so let's say A didn't work and B didn't work, then I would do C. I'd say 1 plus 2 times the square root of 2, and I would do 1 minus 2 times the square root of 2, and I'd see if that decimal matches what I got, right? But in this case, it's a whole number A. It says, Coach Garrett surveyed his classes and asked 9 students what their average was. The responses are below. So, do you think that I only have 9 students in all my classes? I got more than 9 in this one class. So this is a what? Sample. That's big right there, okay? It's a sample. Now, what's my N value real quick? N is the number of items there are. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Okay? Now it says, please calculate the mean, the variance, and the standard deviation. Right? So all you had to do was plug all those values into the calculator, right? So here is where I plugged all the values in the calculator, and that's kind of hard to see, but I went to Stat and Edit and plugged them in, right? And we learned to do it by hand, but now we can do it on the calculator. Now, here is when I ran the one variable statistics, you can see that your mean is 79.7. Because I told you to round to the nearest tenth. That's one place past the decimal. So this 6 makes that 6 a 7. So for the mean, you should have put 79.7, which everybody but one person did. Okay. Now, what does this right here, S of X, 19.685, blah, 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 blah. What is that? That's the standard deviation of a what? Sample. Okay? This right here is your standard deviation of a sample. Okay? Now, if we go back to our questions, number 3 is the variance. So I wouldn't put that in for number 3, would I? But I'd put that in for number what? 4. Now, we know that variance is sigma squared, and standard deviation is just what? Sigma, right? So if you have the variance, you can square root it to get the standard deviation. But if you have the standard deviation, what do you do to it to get the variance? Square it, okay? So as we look right here, we have the standard deviation. That's our answer for 4. If we want the variance, we have to take this entire number and square it. So look in the calculator right here. See how I wrote the entire number? And then I did what to it? Squared it. So for number 3, your variance, you should have put 387.5. Whether you put 387.5 or 50, it's going to give you the credit, okay? And then, so number 3 was 387.5. And then number 4, where it asked for the standard deviation, you should have just put 19.7, because this 8 makes this 6 into a what? 7. Got it? So let's go back and let's mark our answers. So the mean, what was the mean? 79.7. The variance was 387.5. And the standard deviation was what? 19.7. Remember this, guys, because if you have the variance, you take the square root of it to get the standard deviation. That tells me that the standard deviation should always be what? The variance? Smaller. The standard deviation should always be smaller than the variance. The standard deviation should always be what? Smaller than the variance. So you put your variance in as 4.4 because you took the square root of it, right? But you got to remember, variance should always be larger than the what? Standard deviation. Variance should always be larger than the standard deviation. Say it. No, variance. That was weak. Variance should always be larger than standard deviation. Say it.